The Exterminator by Kirsten Weir. Can an old pesticide that is banned in most countries defeat one of the world's worst diseases? Few Americans ever give much thought to malaria. That wasn't always so. Malaria once infected and killed many people in the United States. During the Civil War, more than 1 million soldiers fell ill with the disease. By the middle of the 20th century, malaria had been wiped out in the United States, Canada, and Northern Europe, but it continues to be a serious health problem in many tropical countries. Malaria kills an estimated 2 million people every year, most of them under the age 5. Despite an international effort to control the disease, malaria rates in Africa have risen over the past few years. It's going in the wrong direction, said Roger Bate, the director of Africa Fighting Malaria, a nonprofit research and advocacy group. Bate is one of several health officials now pushing for broader use of DDT, dichloryl diphenyl trichloroethane, a chemical that played an important role in kicking malaria out of the United States. They argue that DDT is the best option for saving lives, but DDT is a touchy subject because it's been banned in the United States and many other countries for decades. Bad air. People once believed that breathing nasty swamp air caused malaria. In fact, the word malaria is Italian for bad air. Toward the end of the 19th century, scientists identified the true cause, a single-celled parasite they named Plasmodium. About the same time, scientists also discovered that mosquitoes act as vectors for the parasite, passing it on when they bite people. A vector is an organism that spreads disease, causing agents from host to host without harm to itself. The malaria parasites need warm temperatures to develop inside mosquitoes, and the balmy southeastern United States was once hit hard by the disease. Malaria existed nearly everywhere mosquitoes did. During steamy summers, the disease reached as far north as Montreal. Changes in living habits, a shift toward city living, better sanitation, and the use of window screens were largely responsible for the eradication of malaria. But DDT also played a part. DDT is an insecticide, a chemical that kills insects. In the 1930s and the 1940s, when the U.S. government made a serious effort to wipe out malaria, DDT was one of its preferred weapons. It was sprayed on swamps and other wet areas where mosquitoes bred. Small amounts were also applied to some household walls in rural communities. By 1951, malaria was gone from the United States, but DDT was still used for other purposes. Huge quantities of it were sprayed by airplane on farmland to kill the insect pests that feasted on cotton and other crops. At first, no one worried about the possible effects of the chemical on the environment. Then in 1962, an ecologist named Rachel Carson captured the country's attention with her book, Silent Spring, which detailed the dangers of DDT. Carson described the damage done by DDT, which persisted in nature for years without breaking down. The chemical first built up in the tissues of fish. It then accumulated inside eagles and other birds of prey that ate the fish. It caused the birds' eggshells to become thin and brittle. The eggs cracked under their own weight, sending bird populations into a nosedive. The U.S. government responded by banning DDT in 1972. Double whammy. Many other countries followed suit, including a number of nations that relied on DDT for malaria control. A handful of malaria-ridden countries have continued to use DDT to control the disease. But even in those countries, DDT is no longer dumped in mass quantities onto the land. It is applied only to the inside of walls of houses. Because malaria mosquitoes bite after dusk, protecting people inside their homes can be very effective. DDT packs a double whammy. It repels most mosquitoes and kills those that get too close. It is by far the cheapest insecticide available, and it lasts twice as long as the alternatives. South Africa was one nation that continued to use DDT after the United States banned the chemical. By 1996, South Africa had fewer than 10,000 annual malaria deaths. That year, the country switched from DDT to other insecticides. The new insecticides were also widely used in farming, and the overexposed mosquitoes quickly became resistant to the chemicals. By 2000, the number of deaths from malaria had risen to more than 60,000. At that point, South Africa turned back to DDT. Within 3 years, malaria infections had dropped to the 1996 levels. In other countries where DDT has been used, from Ecuador to Sri Lanka, it has had similar positive effects. Today, only about 20 countries use DDT for malaria control, according to Roger Bate. Many more could benefit, he says. Public fear. Why don't more countries use the powerful insecticide? DDT probably has more opponents than any other insecticide because of its historical use, explained Bate, but it's mistaking the point. All of the problems associated with it in the past are down to the mess that was made of it in farming. Some wealthy countries worry about the double standard of supporting the use of a chemical abroad that they've banned at home. The memory of Silent Spring and dying bald eagles also lingers. Most of the money that tropical countries use to fight malaria comes from international donors. Many of those donors are reluctant to fund the use of a chemical that scares so many people. Why DDT can't be dealt with rationally, as you deal with any other insecticide, I don't know. Janet Hemingway, the director of the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, told the New York Times. People get upset about DDT and merrily go and recommend an insecticide that's much more toxic. Bate and many of his colleagues argue that the public's fear of DDT is unfounded. Billions of Americans were exposed to the high amount of DDT when it was used in agriculture, Bates said, without any harm to human health. And many scientists agree that the small amounts needed for malaria protection would likely have no significant effect on the environment. Meanwhile, malaria is not going away. Some scientists estimate that malaria has killed half of all the people who have ever lived. Today, the disease claims 2 lives every minute. The most severely affected countries are in Africa, where the disease takes the life of 1 in every 20 children. Some scientists worry that the situation could become even worse. As global warming heats up the planet, mosquitoes are spreading into areas where they once could not survive. Hotter temperatures also allow the Plasmodium parasite to develop faster inside the mosquito, infecting more people in a short amount of time. Most scientists now think that eradicating malaria is impossible, given the complicated life cycle of the parasite. But chipping away at the disease is possible, and DDT has proved itself to be a valuable tool. The big picture is bad, but there are examples out there of what works, Bates said. We need every tool in the arsenal.